Before we start, I want to say that only 1% of you are subscribed. Please subscribe because when we reach 1,000 subscribers, I will post a special video for you. John stepped off the shuttle with his bag slung over his shoulder, squinting under the bright twin suns of the Galactic Peace Academy. The campus sprawled across the horizon, buildings shimmering with energy-efficient surfaces, nestled on the lush greenery that seemed too vibrant for any natural world. "Quite the sight, isn't it?" remarked a voice next to him. John turned to see another human, slightly older, with a friendly grin. "Name's Eric. First time at the GPA?" "Yeah, I'm John." "It's more impressive than I expected," John replied, shaking Eric's outstretched hand. As they walked towards the registration hall, the crowd became a tapestry of diverse species. Some floated by with gelatinous bodies, others towered over John, their crystalline skin catching the sunlight. "I heard our tactical strategy course is the toughest they offer," Eric mentioned, navigating through a group of chattering insectoid creatures. "Humans usually have an edge, but it's not all about muscle in these parts." John nodded, his gaze lingering on a group of 4-armed Martokians who seemed to be arguing in a flurry of gestures. "I'm looking forward to the challenge. Strategy's always been my game back home," John said. "Same here," Eric chuckled. "But keep in mind, it's not just about the military stuff. They say we need to learn how to think like our neighbors, not just outmaneuver them." Inside the bustling registration hall, John and Eric queued up behind a towering Telnarian, whose body seemed to be made of shifting sands. The Telnarian glanced down at them, a smile forming in its sand. "You are new. First cycle?" It rumbled, its voice a deep cascade. "First for us, yeah. I'm John and this is Eric." John introduced them both, slightly raising his voice over the hum of 100 alien dialects. "Ah, I am THR Gil. It is good to see more humans. We are few here, mostly thinkers, not fighters," THR Gil said, the sands of its face rearranging to what John took as a gesture of friendliness. "THR Gil here has a point," Eric whispered to John as they moved forward in line. "We might be used to a certain way of thinking about strategy, but here, it's going to take a lot more creativity and cooperation." John mulled over that as he filled out his digital registration form, a complex array of personal and educational history fields interspersed with legal disclaimers about interspecies etiquette and conflict resolution. Once registered, they received their schedules, room assignments, and a welcome kit that included a universal translator device. "Looks like we're in the same block. Roommates actually," Eric noted, checking his digital schedule. "Great. It'll be good to have a familiar face around," John responded, relief mingling with excitement. They were about to head to their assigned residence when a sudden, sharp cry for help pierced the ambient noise. A young Plixen had tripped over, its many belongings scattered around. Without hesitation, John and Eric hurried over, gathering up what looked like books, gadgets, and oddly shaped instruments. "Thank you, friends," the Plixen clicked, its vertical mouth flaps quivering with gratitude. "I am called Zil Q. I'm John, and this is Eric." "Happy to help," John said, handing over a particularly slippery gadget back to Zil Q. "Maybe you can return the favor by explaining what this is?" Eric joked, holding up a device that continuously changed color and shape. "Ah, that is a molecular gastronomy kit. I cook." Zil Q clicked happily. As they helped Zil Q to its feet, John felt the first true surge of excitement. This place wasn't just about learning from books and simulations. It was about these moments of unexpected connection. "Looks like we've got more than just tactics to learn here, Eric," John said as they walked toward their dorm, a newfound camaraderie forming between the trio. Eric laughed. "Yeah, and I'm guessing it's going to start with figuring out what molecular gastronomy tastes like on this planet." Their laughter mingled with the symphony of alien voices, a sound that spoke of the beginning of something new and challenging at the Galactic Peace Academy. John and Eric, accompanied by their new Plixen friend Zilq, entered their first tactical strategy class. The room was an amphitheater, filled with seating tailored to accommodate the various alien anatomies, and at the center was a holographic display of a complex battlefield. "Welcome, students," greeted the professor, a stern-looking Veltrinian known for his strategic prowess in interstellar negotiations. His skin was an array of shifting patterns, indicating his mood and thoughts, currently a swirl of contemplative blues and greens. I am Professor Varn, and here we will challenge what you know about strategy, war, and peace. The students settled in, an eclectic mix of species with different interpretations of sitting. John and Eric found spots near the front while Zilq positioned itself slightly above them, using its levitation abilities. Our first lesson, Professor Varn started, involves the Battle of Gliese 581G, an historical conflict that shows the complexity of interstellar warfare where multiple species were involved. As Varn detailed the battle's tactics, using the holograms to illustrate movements and strategies, John leaned over to Eric. Looks like we're starting with a real brain teaser. Eric nodded. Yeah, and see how the Veltrinians negotiated peace? It's not just about fighting. Professor Varn then turned the discussion to the class. Now, who can tell me why the coalition forces decided to retreat even when they had numerical superiority? A Zelfarian student raised a limb, the classroom's translator broadcasting its thoughts. Because their supply lines were overextended and local resistance was higher than anticipated. Excellent point, Varn acknowledged. Understanding the context of your environment and the morale of your people is crucial. The professor then assigned a group exercise. Each team was to propose a strategy for either side of the Gliese 581G conflict, considering both military and diplomatic angles. John, Eric, and Zilq teamed up with THRR Gil and a silent, shadowy figure named Drex, who was from a species known for their stealth and cryptic communication. As the group gathered around a digital table, Drex finally spoke. His voice a deep echo. Stealth and misinformation could have aided the retreat, creating illusions of larger forces. Gil's shifting sands formed what looked like a nod. Integrating Drex's deception tactics with a diplomatic outreach could have minimized losses. John was quick to sketch out their ideas on the digital table. Let's combine that with a blockade of the supply routes using drones, adding a layer of technological warfare. Eric, thinking about the logistical aspects, suggested, and if we set up a series of negotiations parallel to the feigned military movements, it might buy enough time for a retreat without major conflict. Zilq, always the one to add a unique perspective, clicked. What if we introduce a third-party mediator? An unbiased species could facilitate the peace talks more effectively. Their strategy started to take shape, a blend of military and diplomatic efforts tailored to create a multifaceted approach to conflict resolution. Professor Varn walked around, listening to the groups. Stopping by theirs, he reviewed their plan. Intriguing blend of tactics and diplomacy. But remember, the real test is in implementation. How would you ensure compliance from all parties? John responded, through constant communication channels and real-time surveillance to monitor treaty adherence. Varn nodded, his patterns shifting into thoughtful amber. Very well. Next class, be ready to simulate this strategy. Real learning happens not just in planning but in execution. As the class ended, the group stayed back to refine their ideas. The collaborative effort wasn't just educational. It was a bonding experience, knitting the diverse team closer through shared intellectual challenge. Walking back to their dorm, John mused aloud. Never thought I'd be strategizing peace in an alien war scenario on my second day. Eric clapped him on the back, laughing. Welcome to the GPA, where the homework is about saving lives, not just taking them. Their laughter echoed down the hall, a sound mingled with hope and the weight of future responsibilities. As the sons of the Academy's planet began their descent, casting long shadows across the campus, John, Eric, and their team gathered in one of the study rooms to prepare for their upcoming simulation. The walls were transparent, giving them a view of the starlit sky and the distant city lights. Okay, let's recap our strategy for tomorrow's sim, John said, tapping on his digital notepad to bring up their plan. We're focusing on a blend of stealth, misinformation, and diplomatic negotiations. Eric leaned forward, pointing at the screen. Right, but we need to flesh out the negotiation part. How exactly are we convincing the opposing forces to come to the table? Churgill's sandy form shifted, creating patterns that resembled thought bubbles. Perhaps we could simulate a crisis that threatens both sides equally, forcing them to negotiate for mutual survival. Drex, who had been quiet, his form cloaked in shadows in the corner of the room, spoke up. We can create a fake signal that suggests a third-party threat entering the system. It could spur temporary alliances. Zilq clicked in agreement. I can't prepare the technical details for the fake signal. It would need to be convincing, possibly mimicking known enemy signatures. John nodded, impressed. That's good. We'll use the crisis to bring them to the table. Eric, can you work on the diplomatic script? What we'll say, how we'll say it. Sure thing, Eric said, pulling up a document on his device. I'll draft some talking points that emphasize mutual benefits and shared risks. The group worked into the evening, each member contributing from their strengths. John focused on the overall strategy. Eric crafted the diplomatic language. HFY suggested psychological tactics to enhance the urgency. Drex worked on stealth operations, and Zilq handled the technical aspects of their plan. As they were wrapping up, Professor Varn unexpectedly walked in. How's the preparation going? He asked, his skin patterns curious. Good evening, Professor, John greeted. We're just going through the final details, trying to ensure our strategy is tight and covers all bases. Varn nodded, walking around the table to glance at their notes. Make sure your plan is adaptable. No battle plan survives first contact intact. Actually, Professor, Eric interjected, we were hoping you could give us some feedback on our diplomatic approach. It's a bit different from the usual military tactics. Varn reviewed Eric's script and nodded slowly. Interesting angle. But remember, sincerity is key in negotiations. Your representatives must seem genuinely invested in the outcomes, not just going through the motions. Understood, Eric replied, making notes. I'll refine the tone to ensure it's more authentic. As Varn left, John looked around at his team, feeling a sense of pride. All right, team, let's run a quick drill. Zilq, initiate the fake signal, and we'll all respond as planned. The simulation ran smoothly, each team member reacting to the staged crisis with precision. They adjusted their parts based on feedback and rehearsed until they felt confident. Finally, as the night deepened, they packed up. Great work, everyone, John said, feeling more prepared than ever. Let's get some rest. Tomorrow we show Professor Varn just how well we can integrate strategy and diplomacy. Agreed, Eric said as they left the study room. Today felt like real progress. Not just in planning a simulation, but in learning how to think like a unified command. Despite our differences, their footsteps echoed softly as they dispersed to their respective quarters, each lost in thoughts about the challenge ahead, feeling ready to face whatever the simulation, and their future careers, might throw at them. The holographic projector lit up the small group study room with simulated star fields and potential conflict zones. John and Eric were early, setting up the space for another intense session of tactical drills. Think we can pull off a convincing diplomatic ruse in the sim tomorrow? John asked, checking the settings on the projector. Eric adjusted his tablet, pulling up their strategy notes. As long as everyone sticks to the script and we adapt quickly to any curveballs, we should be fine. Just then, HFY and Drex entered the room, the former's sands swirling in a pattern that suggested eagerness. Good evening. I have revised the psychological operations components based on last night's trial. They should now complement the diplomatic approach more effectively. Great to hear, Eric said as he greeted them. Drex, any updates on the stealth maneuvers? Drex, his voice a deep echo, responded. I've integrated some feedback from Zilq about sensor evasion. We're now much harder to detect if they initiate a scan during negotiations. As they settled into their seats, Zilq floated in, a series of lights blinking along its body indicating its readiness. I've set up the simulations for tonight. We can run multiple scenarios to test each approach. Perfect, John said, clapping his hands together. Let's start with the diplomatic engagement scenario. Eric, you're up first. Eric nodded and began the simulation. The room's walls displayed a negotiation room on a starship, with Eric's avatar facing two hostile alien commanders. His voice was steady as he introduced the proposed alliance against the fictitious third-party threat. John monitored the responses from the simulated aliens, noting down reaction times and objections. Pause, he said after a particularly tense exchange. Eric, try emphasizing the shared economic benefits more. Their main concern seems to be resource allocation. Eric adjusted his dialogue and they resumed. This time, the exchange went smoother, with the alien avatars showing signs of agreement. THR Gill, observing closely, suggested, perhaps add a clause about technology sharing. It often eases tensions and fosters goodwill. Good point, John agreed, making a note. Let's incorporate that into the next run. As they progressed through various scenarios, Drex's focus was on ensuring their strategy remained hidden. Let's simulate an accidental leak of our true intentions, he proposed. It'll test our ability to recover and still maintain trust. They enacted the scenario, with Zilq quickly implementing a countermeasure to obscure their tactics. The teamwork was seamless, each member playing off the other's strengths and covering any weaknesses. After several hours, the team took a short break, discussing more than just strategies. How do you think these skills will translate after graduation? John asked the group, genuinely curious about their future. Shargill's patterns showed contemplation. Diplomacy is universal. Whether in war or commerce, understanding and negotiation are key. Drex, usually more reserved, added, stealth isn't just for battle. It's about knowing when to show strength and when to remain hidden, even in politics or business. As they wrapped up for the night, Eric looked around at the group. I think these sessions are about more than just the project. We're really learning from each other. Not just tactics, but how to bridge our differences. John smiled, feeling a mix of fatigue and fulfillment. Let's keep this momentum going. Tomorrow, we bring all this together and make it work under pressure. They nodded, the shared determination clear in their expressions. As they left the study room, the stars outside seemed a little less distant, a reminder of the vast and varied futures they were preparing for. After a particularly grueling simulation session, John and Eric decided to decompress at the Academy's Zero-Gravity Lounge, a popular spot for students to unwind. The lounge's artificial stars dotted the ceiling, creating a tranquil nocturnal atmosphere. Man, today's sim was intense, John remarked, floating effortlessly with a tethered drink in his hand. I think we're really getting the hang of integrating our tactics. Eric, spinning slightly as he adjusted his position, nodded. Yeah, it's one thing to plan, another to execute under pressure. But, I think we did pretty good today. As they talked, Lyra, the Xiphorian classmate known for her analytical prowess, drifted over to them. Her species was renowned for their emotional intelligence, making her a valuable ally in negotiations. Mind if I join you? Lyra asked, her voice soft but clear. Not at all, John said, motioning to an open space next to him. We're just talking about today's exercise. Lyra floated into position, stabilizing herself with a graceful ease. I was impressed with your handling of the crisis scenario. It was enlightening to watch. John felt a flutter of pride. Thanks, Lyra. We've been working hard on blending our approaches. What did you think of the diplomatic angle? It was thoughtful, Lyra replied. In Xiphorian culture, diplomacy is about harmony and understanding. You managed to incorporate some of that, even if indirectly. The conversation flowed easily, turning from academic topics to personal interests. John was intrigued by Lyra's descriptions of Xiphoria's vast libraries and cultural archives. Sounds like a place I'd love to visit, John mused, imagining the alien landscapes. Lyra's eyes lit up, the colors of her irises shifting with emotion. You should. I think you'd appreciate the historical strategies we've employed peacefully. As the lounge began to empty, Eric excused himself, sensing a growing intimacy between John and Lyra. I'll catch up with you guys later, he said with a knowing smile. Left alone, John and Lyra continued their conversation, gradually drifting closer. The topics became more personal, touching on hopes, dreams, and the challenges of being far from home. I've never really talked about this stuff with anyone here, John admitted, his voice lower. It's nice. Lyra nodded, her expression thoughtful. It's easy to feel isolated, even surrounded by so many. Sharing this, it makes the galaxy seem a little smaller, more connected. Their hands brushed accidentally, or perhaps not so accidentally, and they both paused. Looking into Lyra's eyes, John felt an unexpected connection. Gently, he reached out, touching her hand. Her response was immediate, her fingers curling around his. "Is this okay?" John asked softly, aware of the differences between their species and not wanting to overstep. "Yes," Lyra whispered, moving slightly closer. "I'm glad it's you." They shared a tender moment, their first kiss a gentle collision in zero gravity, their bodies slowly revolving in the starlit room. The kiss was a discovery, soft and explorative, marking the beginning of something new and profoundly moving. After a moment, they parted slightly, just enough to see each other's faces. "I didn't expect this," John said, his heart racing. "Neither did I, but I'm not complaining," Lyra replied, her smile radiant. As they held each other, floating among artificial stars, the complexity of their coursework seemed trivial compared to the complexity of their feelings. For the first time since arriving at the academy, John felt a profound sense of belonging, not just to a school, but to someone special. The night ended with a promise to explore their connection further, beyond the simulations and strategies, into the uncharted territories of their intertwined futures. The morning of the midterm simulation found John and Eric at the Academy's main simulation chamber, bustling with nervous energy. Lyra joined them, her presence bringing a calm to John's jittery nerves. "Are we all set for this?" John asked, reviewing their strategic plan on his tablet one last time. Eric, double-checking their equipment, nodded. "We've prepped as much as we can. Just need to stay sharp and adapt as needed." Lyra, ever the voice of reason, added, "And remember, it's about showing how well we can integrate our strategies under real-time conditions, not just about winning." The professor overseeing the midterm, Dr. Halgren, called the students to attention. "Today, you'll be running live simulations that replicate complex diplomatic and tactical scenarios. Your grades will depend on your ability to execute your plans effectively and adaptively." As the simulation started, John took the lead, directing his team through the initial stages of their plan. Eric was in charge of communications, making sure their deceptive maneuvers remained undetected, while Lyra monitored the opposing forces' responses. "Eric, update on the opposition's movements?" John asked, his eyes glued to the screen showing real-time data. "They're taking the bait," Eric reported, a hint of satisfaction in his voice. "Looks like our fake distress signals are working. They're diverting resources to investigate." Lyra chimed in, her focus unwavering. "Diplomatic channels are open. I'm starting the negotiations now. Remember, we need them to believe we're sincerely proposing a mutual defense pact." As Lyra engaged with simulated alien diplomats, John and Eric watched the fluctuating parameters, ready to tweak their tactics on the fly. "John, I think we need to adjust our approach," Eric suggested, pointing at a new set of data. "Their suspicion levels are rising. Maybe we pushed the distress signal too hard." Thinking quickly, John nodded. "Pull back on that. Let's not give them any more reasons to doubt us. Meanwhile, I'll reinforce our stance in the negotiations, back up Lyra's points with a show of defensive capabilities." As the simulation progressed, the tension in the room grew. Every student and team was deeply engaged, their actions reflecting weeks of preparation and adaptation to the unfolding scenarios. "Status update, Lyra?" John asked, his tone steady despite the high stakes. "We're making progress," Lyra responded, her voice calm. "They're cautious, but the dialogue is still open. I think they're considering our proposal seriously now." The simulation's final phase began, and the team's efforts to balance aggressive tactics with diplomatic outreach came to a head. The opposing forces started to respond more positively to the negotiations, lowering their defenses. "Looks like we might just pull this off," Eric said, allowing a small grin to break through his focused demeanor. As the clock ticked down, the professor observed their performance, making notes on a digital clipboard. Finally, the simulation ended, and the room erupted into a mix of relief and anticipation, waiting for feedback. Dr. Halgren approached John, Eric, and Lyra. "Impressive work," he commented. "Your ability to adapt and integrate different strategies was notable. But remember, the real test is how these skills translate outside of simulations." The trio exchanged relieved glances. "Thank you, Professor," John said. "We've learned a lot about working together and blending our approaches." As they debriefed among themselves, Eric clapped John on the shoulder. What a rush, huh? Feels good to see our hard work pay off like this. Yeah, it does, John agreed, looking over at Lyra with a smile. And it's even better with great teammates. Lyra returned the smile, her eyes reflecting a shared sense of accomplishment and deeper connection. Let's keep this momentum going. I think we can make a real difference with what we've learned here. As they left the simulation chamber, the group felt not just the satisfaction of a job well done, but also the promise of future collaborations that could one day influence real-world outcomes far beyond the Academy's simulations. The success of the midterm simulations had left the team buoyed and eager to explore the applications of their newfound collaborative skills. With a few weeks left before final exams, John, Eric, Lyra, and the rest of their group decided to dedicate some time to unwind and strengthen their bonds outside the classroom. John suggested a visit to the Academy's botanical gardens, a sprawling collection of flora from hundreds of worlds, as a place to relax and reflect. The group agreed enthusiastically, seeing it as a perfect way to celebrate their midterm success. As they walked through the lush, alien landscapes, the conversation flowed freely. Eric, always curious, was particularly interested in the practical applications of their strategies. So, think we could really pull off something like our sim in real life? Eric asked, gazing at a plant that seemed to shimmer with its own internal light. John, walking beside him, nodded thoughtfully. I think so. It's all about the context, though. Real situations have higher stakes, more unpredictability. Lyra, who was examining a delicate fern-like plant, added, and it's about the people involved. Trust, understanding. Those are just as important as the strategies themselves. HFY, their sandy companion, shaped his form to mimic the environment around them, blending in as he spoke. Indeed, the cultural components we simulated are crucial. Understanding each species' background and motivations can make or break an alliance. Drex, usually reserved, chimed in from the back. Stealth and diplomacy is about more than just hiding things. It's about revealing the right things at the right time. As the afternoon light waned, John and Lyra found themselves slightly apart from the others, their conversation turning personal. John shared more about his human background, his family, and what led him to the Academy. Lyra listened intently, her gaze soft. You've really embraced what it means to be a part of this place. Integrating so much from everyone, not just academically. John smiled, his feelings for Lyra deepening with the easy exchange of words and emotions. I've had good reasons to, he said, glancing at her with unspoken affection. Noticing their friends lagging behind, Eric teased, Hey, you two planning to start your own diplomatic corps? Laughing, John and Lyra rejoined the group, the atmosphere light and hopeful. The group decided to sit by a softly glowing pond, watching as nocturnal creatures began to stir. Here, they discussed not just the past and the present, but the future as well. Dreams of contributing to galactic peace, of using their skills to bridge worlds. It's been an incredible journey with all of you, Eric said, looking around at the group. Whatever happens next, I know we've made something great here. Agreed, John said. It's more than just learning together. It's about growing together. As night deepened, they made their way back to the dorms, the paths illuminated by bioluminescent plants. The connection between them all, strengthened by both professional respect and personal affection, promised enduring friendships and future collaborations. Lyra squeezed John's hand gently as they walked. No matter where we all end up, I believe we'll keep finding ways to make a difference, together. John returned the squeeze, feeling confident and content. With you all by my side, I'm sure of it. Their conversation lingered in the air, a blend of laughter and thoughtful whispers, as they continued back, ready for the challenges and opportunities that awaited them beyond the Academy's walls. The morning of graduation was crisp and clear, with the twin suns of the Academy casting a radiant glow over the campus. The grand auditorium was bustling with excitement as families and friends of various species gathered, their conversations a melodic cacophony of diverse languages and sounds. John, Eric, and Lyra, dressed in the traditional robes of the Academy, were in the midst of their classmates, feeling a mixture of nostalgia and anticipation. They spotted HFY and Drex among the crowd, each preparing for the ceremony in their own unique way. This feels surreal, doesn't it? Eric mused, adjusting his cap. Seems like just yesterday we were trying to figure out our first simulation. John nodded, his eyes scanning the auditorium. It's been an incredible ride. Can't believe it's ending. Lyra, ever the empathetic one, smiled gently. It's not ending, just transforming. We're stepping into new roles, new challenges. As they found their seats, the dean of the academy, a venerable old Grimoire known for his wisdom and fairness, began the ceremony with a warm welcome. Today, we celebrate not just the accomplishments of our graduates, but the journey they have embarked upon together. One by one, students went up to receive their diplomas, their names and achievements announced over the loudspeaker. When John's turn came, he walked up with steady steps, his heart swelling with pride. The dean handed him his diploma, his voice booming, "John Harper, recognized for outstanding leadership and innovative strategy." Cheers erupted from the section where Eric, Lyra, and the rest of his friends were seated. Lyra's clapping was the loudest, her face beaming with pride. Eric received his diploma with a roguish grin, his knack for communication and diplomacy highlighted. Eric Dalton, a master of negotiation and intercultural communication, the dean announced, prompting another wave of applause. Finally, Lyra walked gracefully to the stage, her achievements in integrating emotional intelligence into tactical strategies earning her special recognition. After the diplomas were handed out, the valedictorian, a sharp-minded Telnarian named Velex, took the stage. His speech resonated with hope and ambition, touching on the theme of their experiences. We've learned that strategic thinking transcends battlefields. It's about understanding, adapting, and sometimes leading change. I'm reminded of the unique challenges we faced, such as when my alien classmates struggled to keep up with Deathworlder tactical strategy homework. It was a challenge that taught us more about each other and ourselves. The ceremony concluded with a standing ovation, the graduates throwing their caps into the air, a whirl of colors against the sky. Afterwards, John, Eric, Lyra, Thr Gill, and Drex gathered for one last group photo. "Let's promise to stay in touch, no matter where we end up," Eric said as they huddled close, the camera capturing their hopeful faces. "Definitely," John agreed. "Who knows? Maybe we'll cross paths on some diplomatic mission or strategic summit." Lyra took John's hand, squeezing it softly. "Wherever we are, I know we'll carry these memories with us. They've shaped who we are and who we'll continue to be." As the group dispersed, John felt a profound sense of accomplishment and connection. The future was uncertain, filled with countless possibilities, but he knew that the bonds they had forged here would endure, guiding them in their separate paths toward a shared vision of peace and understanding across the galaxy. The graduates left the auditorium, stepping into the sunlight, ready to apply their learned wisdom to the real challenges of the universe, carrying with them the lessons of the Galactic Peace Academy.